Morning, good afternoon. I don't know if anybody will be in the evening zone, but evening in case you're following us. I'm happy to come to you on a Saturday, but we're doing this precisely because today is Open Data Day. And we thought that it's very important to have this conversation about open data today with eminent people in the space. Now, everywhere you turn today, everybody is talking about data, how important data is, data protection, open data, cross-border data flows, data localization. There's always data something happening right now. And our purpose this morning is to really explore this concept of open data from the lenses of our eminent experts that have done a lot of work in the space. We want them to throw more light on what they are doing. We want them to throw more light on how we can address some of the challenges that we've seen in the space. We want them to throw more light on how this can really help us advance the development of Africa. And so without much ado, let me just introduce them, and ladies first. So I'll start with Mahadia Tunga. Mahadia is a Tanzanian data lab co-founder, a center of excellence for data science and data-driven innovation that was initially established with the funding from the Millennium Challenge Corporation and the US Presidential Emergency Funds for HIV/AIDS relief. In charge of the firm's data science, research, and capacity development section, Mahadia has been instrumental in D-Lab's ability to leverage partnerships with the University of Dar es Salaam, Stanford, University of Virginia, George Mason University to spearhead collaborative research, consulting, gender-based programs, and training on data science. As a business analyst herself, she has worked on the requirement gathering, analysis, and design of various software systems, such as the local government human resource information system for the President's Office, regional administration, FEO care for hospitals under the local government authority in Tanzania as well. As a training consultant also, she has developed a number of online and face-to-face data science curriculum for D-Lab and trained over 3,000 individuals and organizations in Tanzania, Uganda, Congo, South Africa, Cairo, Kenya, Ethiopia, Zambia, just to mention a few. She's also actively involved in D-Lab's partnership with the National Bureau of Statistics to strengthen Tanzania's national data ecosystem. And so welcome, Mahadi. I'm very excited. You have a very rich CV, so I'm hoping that you'll be share a lot with us. Welcome, Mahadia. And then we have Victor. Victor is currently the Senior Africa Regional Manager for Global Partnership for Sustainable Development based at the UN Foundation. Victor leads and manages political and technical engagements, activities, and products of the Global Partnership in Africa and provides guidance on how the partnership can bring together people to strengthen the data ecosystems and how the various sources of data can be assessed and used to achieve the SDGs and sustainable development more broadly. And, you know, we have to really say a big thank you to Victor for joining us because he practically haven't slept and he's joining us all the way from Canada. So we're eating into his sleeping time. Thank you, Victor, for joining us. And last but not the least is Mr. Umar Seidu, who's the head of demographic statistics and coordinator for data for the SDGs in in Ghana. Uma is a social statistician with over 20 years experience in statistics production process, with the responsibility of coordinating data for monitoring the Sustainable Development Goals in Ghana. Uma leads a drive around data innovation, multi-stakeholder approach to data production, and then strengthening administrative data systems. He's also a member of the Interagency and Expert Group on Sustainable Development Goals, and currently the co-chair for the Technical Advisory Committee of Digital Earth Africa. He is a member of both the Global Technical Advisory Groups on Violence Against Women and COVID-19 Mortality Assessment put together by UN Women and WHO. He serves on several other national and international platforms on data for development. Uma believes that we urgently need to collect and establish more timely data to trigger policy and interventions and enforce regulations. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again, and thank you for joining us. Without much ado, I think I just want to delve straight in. I'll just give each of you maybe a minute or two to just give us, some opening remarks. If I didn't share anything about yourselves, you can also tell us something that we are missing. But the idea here is to have a very open conversation and to simplify the issues of open data to our ordinary audience that are following us from Facebook, and then also some are joining us on this platform as well. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you once again for joining us. So without much ado, I think I'll start with Mahadia, and then I'll come to Victor. Just give us some quick, maybe a minute opening about who you are, about what you think open data is, what you think the future is, and then we can take the conversation up from there. Mahadia.
Thank you very much, Teki. I think you have introduced me. I couldn't add anything on that. For me, as we are moving towards the fourth industrial revolution, I see open data as a key ingredient for Africa to achieve or to reap the fruit of fourth industrial revolution. And that's part of what I'm going to highlight in terms of how open data is important for development. Thank you.
Uma.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much.
We seem to be losing you, Uma. Maybe if you can just turn your video off so that we can have like a stable conversation. Can you hear me? Okay, Victor, I'll move to you and then we'll come back to Uma.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Teki. I hope you can hear me well.
Perfect.
Yeah, good. Oh, okay, Omar is back on.
Opportunity to be part of this engagement, and I will want to later for the log. Yeah. Is that better now?
Yes, it's better without the video. So I think maybe.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do without a video. I think that's fine for me. Okay. Yeah. So I would want to. Yes. So I would want to look at it from the perspective of the relevance of data for national development. You would realize that for any country to progress, you need to be well informed on the people, on the environment, and on the resources available to you, and how you utilize the environment, the resources, and the human capital. And our ability to effectively use this relies largely on the availability of evidence that will point us to what, how, and where we need to make some investment and redirect our policies. So to that extent, speaking about data is one of the key drivers of development. And of course, open data then becomes the opportunity to have access to these data for national development. So it's a great opportunity to discuss this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Uma. Victor.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe I'll just also switch up my video to, enable the better connectivity for the other panelists. So thanks so much, Seki. And for me, I would, want to harp on the fact that data is that most critical, imminent infrastructure for driving and achieving sustainable development, and of course, the SDGs. And, without access to the required data and information, it then becomes pretty much difficult and utmostly impossible, amongst other things, so to speak, to achieve sustainable development. And so what I want to see, and, I'm pushing strongly across the continent, is the type of, sustainable partnerships and collaborations that could help us unlock access to the data and information that is required, for, as Omar said, for policy and decision making at all levels that will indeed help us achieve sustainable development in the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Let me come to you, Uma. I just want to ask this question. I mean, we hear it a lot. What is open data? Okay, what is open data? And I think I will throw the question to all of you. Yeah, because I think we need to understand that. What is open data?
Yes. So I would want to approach it from a very simplistic and lay person perspective. Okay. So open data is basically making data available to everyone freely, for them to access it, for them to be able to use it, for people to be able to reuse what others are using, be able to do some modification to it, be able to share it for any purposes, but of course, subject to some requirements that ensures that these, in the process of doing this, the individual data subjects do not have their rights infringed on. And so making data freely available to anyone who wants to have that data, use it for any purposes that they want to use it for, and be able to modify the data to suit their purposes without, infringing on other people's rights. That is open data. Thank you.
Thank you, Uma. Mahadia?
For me, open data is about the freedom of using the data in a sense that the data is available for people of different groups, not only available, but also accessible, and people have that freedom of use. And when I talk here about freedom of use, I don't mean in terms of cost, but rather the data is packaged in such a way that people from different sorts of background can be able to manipulate that data. So it is in the format that it's easily, so that it's in the ready to use by other people. So that for me is that freedom of use of that data. That's what I call open data. So data published in a format, in a platform that can be accessible to people using standards that people understand. So creating that that friendly environment for data to be able to be used and reused. So that means, so that for me, that is open data. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahadia. Victor.
Yeah, and I do
Your
agree to,
perspective.
yeah, I do agree to, how both, Umar and Mahadia had, described, I would say, and the concept of open data. And I do also want to say that, it's data that is, designated as public assets, and it's made openly available, freely available, and accessible to everyone, regardless of their social and economic status. And Mahadia mentioned, the fact that it should be in formats that should be easily understandable, can quickly be taken and reused. But I think that one of the most important thing also about open data is the requirement it's, puts on the user, in ensuring that it causes no harm. The user uses the data, it's freely made available to you, but there's a huge requirement on you to ensure that it causes no harm and it does not diminish the rights of the owners of that data, but is used for the common good of our society. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen and lady. I mean, this is really triggering a lot of questions in my mind. And one of the things that I would love to have an understanding of, and I believe our audience as well, is based on what you're saying. I mean, this covers a broad spectrum of data, right? So when we are talking about open data, what kinds of data are we typically looking at? It would be good to, I'll start from you, Victor, and then I'll come to Mahadia and then Omar.
Yeah, thank you. I think any and all types of data actually can be made, and could be designated as open data. And of course, we do know that there is open data, there is also closed data. But as long as the community has designated that these data sets, should be made open, should be made available to everyone, it then becomes an open, source data. And it could be demographic type data, it could be, big data, it could be financial data, it could be, GIS type data, geographic information system type data. So any set, and we've seen across many countries in Africa where these various data sets and types actually have been put on open source platforms, and so any type of data, as long as the community of that data users and creators or producers have agreed that these sets of data, fully, are de-anonymized, so to speak, can be made open and available to the public, it then becomes, an open asset. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mahadia.
Yeah, I support Victor in terms that open data, I mean, we need all data that is not sensitive to be shared. So that means like data from the sector perspective, from the development perspective, like education, health, water, etc. So budgeting, so people are able to understand the rationale. So yeah, it's all that source of data that is not sensitive and it's not private data, and data that has been anonymized. So all that kind of data should be shared openly, and and should be shared openly and under different in different ways, be it a visual data or statistics or text, etc. So yeah, so for me, all kind of data that has been anonymized, not private, not sensitive, that data should be shared.
Thank you. Thank you. Omar. Umar.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And let me take it from this angle. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Umar, go ahead. Yes, we can hear you.
So yeah, I do agree with both. Yes. Okay. So as Madia said, data that is anonymized, that can not be easily used to identify individual data who the data refers to, or institutions or establishments that the data refers to. So any data that would provide insights on our living conditions, on our environment, on our resources, on our politics, that do not necessarily give access to or individuals who the data refer to should be made available, because through making these data available, so much insights will be derived that support all the kinds of data that should be made available.
Okay, thank you.
Whether the data are held by private entities, whether the data are held by private entities or public entities, such data should be made available. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm hearing a lot of things, issues coming up, and a lot of questions are popping up in my head. So let me just follow up. Victor, you had mentioned that, any data that we decide should be open, can be made open. And I'm just questioning this. Who should be taking those decisions, right? In the context of Africa, who are the people that should be taking decisions around which data should be made open, and what should inform that decision on whether or not to make data open? I'm going to start with you, Victor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Seki. I did say that one of the critical elements of the work that we do is enabling, partnerships and collaborations between all stakeholders within the data ecosystem. And this includes, both state governments and, of course, non-state parties, which include civil society groups, NGOs, research academia, developer communities, etc. Even the media, and so within a typical data ecosystem, there is normally a decision that should be taken in the favor of that entire community, to agree that this set of data could be made open and totally align with the requirements that's been specified by Omar, that data set is made open and is used purely for, public good, for decision making in development related issues. And there are endless, use cases in this regard, fighting crime to allocating, resources to where schools and hospitals should be built, to attending to women and girls related issues, maternal and child health related issues. And so when that community together, both the users and owners of the data, which include the citizens themselves, from which these data sets are generated from, everyone has got to have a say in what should be made open and not open. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Hadia, yes. So I'm asking the same question. Who should be deciding what data should be made open, and what should inform that decision making generally from your perspective?
So who should be, so for me, who should be should be the owner of the data. And I'm talking about the owner, though we know that data is a public good, but with the African culture, the closed culture. So I think for us, for the old, I mean, for those who are collecting or managing the data, to share, and they can start sharing little by little, let's say starting a certain type of data set. And then once they understand that there is no harm in sharing and actually it does good, they can share more data. So for me, those who are managing collecting and managing the data, being it NGO or government or whoever, they are the ones who should be, share the data openly. And I'm saying that is because that ownership, ownership is not important, but understanding who has that responsibility is key, in a sense that, because we already know if we just put the data in our platforms, that might not be, it might be open, but it might not be used, because the end goal of this data is to be used. And then for me, so whoever is managing that data, they have a role of sharing that data. And so sharing is one step. I think at later point I think we can also touch base on sharing is one, but then what's about the use of that open data? But at this point, I would say those who have those who are managing that data have responsibility to share that data.
Thank you. Thank you. Oma, I just want to come to you now. So who decides what should be open, what should inform that decision?
Yeah, so interestingly, yes, ended its 53rd session yesterday. The Statistical Commission is the highest level statistics globally at the UN. And every year, in March mostly, the commission meets to make decisions around data and statistics and principles guiding these globally. This year's session, which was purely virtual, started with a number of side events. And the main session of the 53rd session started on the 1st of March to the 4th of March yesterday. And one of the items that the Secretary General's notes that was debated and adopted yesterday was the report looking at making data open by default. Now, in this principle, the understanding is any person who produces data that has some public good should, as part of the principles of producing that data, also make the data openly available. So it is not only government, and a lot of times you see people want to quickly jump at blaming government for not making data openly available. Yet, even if you go to civil society organizations amongst them, they do not even have open data policies. They don't even share data amongst themselves. Government institutions, different government institutions do not share data among themselves. Everybody is holding on to their piece so tightly that you sometimes have no idea what else is available, I guess, across the streets. Now, among academic institutions, a lot of data, because a lot of research works happen in academic institutions, but people outside in industry or elsewhere have no idea, except when these have been used for peer-reviewed journals, and then you are able to chance on that. And so these when we want to make data open, it is not just about particular entities. It's about all of us who produce data, understanding that that data has some value for national development. Then this data should be made available, but of course, with the necessary safeguards to protect the individuals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omar. Wow. So really, I mean, I just want to follow up on this. And again, I think this will go to all of you. Who is the ideal enabler, right? And what is the ideal enabling situation if we're talking about open data? Here, Omar, you're talking, essentially you're saying that all of us are collecting and holding some form of data that would be useful for public good along the line. However, here you are bringing up concepts like open by default. How can I, enable that? And I really want us to talk a bit more about what are the enablers? How do we ensure that we're able to make this data open, especially bearing in mind that there are also restrictions, and I'll come to that after this round of questions. Umar, I think I'll start with you because you raised this issue.
Yes, so I think given the mandate of national statistical offices globally and under the fundamental principles, the UN fundamental principles of official statistics, I think the game starts with national statistical offices. And it is important in this context because globally, national statistical offices have a mandate around producing data and coordinating the data space in countries. And so if national statistical offices lead the crusade around making data openly available by demonstrating and living by that principle, then it is very likely others would also make data openly available. Now, some guides data being open, there are quite a number of things that usually will determine whether the data was first collected using ethical methods, whether the data meets certain minimum standards of quality, and a host of things. And so if these data that are compiled do not meet some of these, naturally, the data producer himself or herself would be reluctant to make this data openly available because the credibility of that institution will be at stake when people begin to. Then there is a problem because the institution will be met with some kind of mistrusts. Okay, so these are some of the things that make sometimes people not want to make their data openly available. But as I said, national statistical offices that are governed by who usually produce data following the quality dimensions should always lead and then try to kind of encourage other institutions in the country to follow suit by introducing them, because making data open also brings about capacity building, because people need to understand the processes for producing good quality data. And once you understand that, because quality data in itself, part of the dimension of data quality includes opening up that data. If you don't open up that data, it means that you do not meet the dimensions of data quality. And not to ensure that they support other entities that produce data to build their capacity to understand the principles that underlie data quality and opening up data, and especially the issues around ethics, the issues around confidentiality, the issues around data privacy, because these are all things that need to be fully embedded in the data, open data policies of countries. So for me, National Statistical Service offices have the responsibility to lead the way in each country. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Where do we stand in this question?
Omar, are you still speaking?
No, I think Umar is done. Victor,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of the enablers, I'm looking at 4 critical things here. One is the quality, dimension, which Omar has, talked a lot about. And that is oftentimes one of the most critical criteria, especially by the National Statistical Offices, for determining what should be made open or not. And I think a lot of institutions also hold back on the data set that they have when it has, quality issues. So quality is a key dimension. And the second thing is around frameworks, and I think that we need, and if you look across Africa, what we're advocating here is modern laws, mechanisms, policies, standards that are adequately contextualized, not just, plug and play, but, properly contextualized to help unlock access to data. And that will also enable effective data sharing and use across both public and private sector, type organizations. Secondly, I strongly also advocate that these laws, national laws and policies, must not only enable efficient data access, but it also should address the issues of data trust, data and digital rights, and even data governance issues. And that infractions of these issues, should be well penalized. And thirdly, there's a big issue around capacity. And I think we need to, strongly, push for the strengthening of data capacity for all players within the data ecosystem, particularly looking at the issues of data ethics, governance, data rights, etc. Because the lack of this demonstrated capacity in many areas can actually be linked to the fear, of opening up data by most governments and the citizens. And finally, I think we need technology infrastructure, that can really help, to make this public data and information open and accessible to all citizens, regardless of who they are. So we're looking at quality issues, the necessary frameworks, laws, and policies. We're looking at capacity, and we're looking at technology infrastructure. So these are the enablers that I think that, we could focus on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor. Mahadia, do you want to add anything to what you think will be the ideal enablers in this space?
Yeah, I think Omar and Victor have mentioned, have preempted me. Maybe I can add a few things. Also thinking on the issue of standardization, data standardization as enabler, because we need data not only to be shared, but being compatible with other stakeholders so that it can be made into use. So data standardization is a key enabler. And on capacity building, I totally agree, because sometimes people are shying away because they think opening data is about exposing them and is against privacy and all sorts of aspects. So capacity building is key, but also I wanted to highlight on the issue of especially on the issue of data licensing, in a sense, to people to be able to understand that they have, even in open data space, those who are managing the data, they also have a right to declare what is opened, and they have different arrangement, for instance, open by attribution, and so that goes to the capacity building. But I think the licensing part also is important, so that people understand what data can be shared and how it can be used when shared. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now to the second leg of the questions that I had for you. A lot of the time, OPTA has been pitched against laws and policies around data protection, intellectual property, some of which you mentioned, data governance and the like, have been pitched around laws and policies around that. And I'm going to start this with you, Victor. Where do you think, where are the issues here? Issues around data protection, intellectual property, enablers, or they are disablers, right, of an open data ecosystem. And I would really like to us to explain how, either these enable or disable, the open data ecosystem. Victoria.
Yes, thank you so much, Tech. That's a good question indeed. And it could take a whole day really to walk through it. Yeah, and I think I would say that it could work in both ways, especially if you look at the situation in most parts of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. It could work both as a disruptor, or as an enabler. And I think one thing that is key here that is often undermined and is lacking is data literacy. Even right at the doorstep of many government officials, even within the public and the private sector, some institutions, you feel that people really know what data is, and all that goes with it. But when you dig deep, you get to discover that there's a lot of illiteracy, so to speak, around data. And that in itself, within the continent, is a major challenge that is really limiting the opening, or the culture, so to speak, around opening up data for public good, because people don't really know what data is, why it is important that we should have it as a public good. And I would, this might come as a surprise to you. Some few years back, I was working on a project and went into a particular government institution in one country in Africa, and the entire data set, was just locked away in somebody's, desk, and the guy has taken the key and gone home. And I'm like, the whole data set, yes, we put it on a hard disk, and they keep it there, and no other person to have, access to it. And it's a critical department of government where they need real-time access to that type of data for emergency decision making. So I think that data literacy itself, and of course the issues of protection, data trust and governance, are also big swingers, and it could swing whether to disrupting the entire process, to opening it up, or of course. But I think that the underlying thing and the denominator here is data literacy, where there is adequate literacy around data. Both, the people on both sides, governments and non-state parties, would find it easy to come together, to that common table and have that, common conversation that leads to a common understanding of why we need to open up this data set. I think there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of trepidation, there's a lot of concern, which is oftentimes born out of data illiteracy. I would want to put it that way. So I think that when we provide sufficient capacity, knowledge about what data is and why it's needed to be open, what it should be used for, the whole requirements around, ensuring that it's not causing harm, it would enable everyone to be able to agree with each other that we need to open up these data sets. And then comes along with it the issues of data governance and the issues of rights and propriety and all of that. And so that's where I stand really, and from what work we've been doing across the continent. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Hadia, I want to come to you now. So where do you see, the policies around data protection, around intellectual property when it comes to open data? Are they enablers or disablers?
As Victor said, it depends on what angles have been had this been thought, and how people, stakeholders, have been involved to design these policies. Because that is also key. Because these policies, frameworks, they need to be tailored per certain situation. So it depends on the nation, different people being involved. If right stakeholder, the ecosystem has been involved, definitely you would expect the output of such kind of frameworks, policies, tackling key issues and act as an enabler. But if it's the other way around, they can act as a distractor. We have seen the national statistical system as the custodians have been promoting the so-called single story, in a sense that they have laid they have made the processes in such a way that it's only work in the favor of one part and not the other part, and kills the, what should I say this? I'm finding a right term, but yeah, because they have outlined the methodology, etc., on how that data should be collected, etc., for that to be open, and then that means you in research perspective, that means you are killing the whole aspect of people being able to do the actual research. If you so it depends on that. And the other thing that is I think the other thing that control on how these policies and frameworks should be structured is a political will, and political wills play a lot in the issues of open data, intellectual property rights, and the governing of data itself. So, and oftentimes you will see, especially in African countries, that one regime and the other is like transfer of the whole aspect on how data should be thought about from one regime, and the other is completely different. And maybe perhaps the important thing is to think on how the whole open data aspect on the institutionalization perspective, so that it's more stable. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Omar, I'm coming back to you with the same question.
Yeah. Yes. So thank you. All right. So let me pick it from where I left off in relation to the open by default principles. You see, the open by default principle serves as the foundation for a set of policies that make any government or any organization's data be made publicly available in accordance with the open data guidelines. Of course, with some number of specific exceptions that deals with, for instance, security or privacy protection. And under this, the key principles that underlie this particular one have to do with establishment, and I'll give some example. Establish cross-government support for open data by default. And this, for instance, has to do with the situation that when using the example of Ghana, when the new law, Act 1003, the Statistical Service Law, that was passed in September 2019, was passed by Parliament and assented by the President. Now, one of the amendments that was made in the Civil Service Law of 1993 was the Civil Service Law of 1993 established as part of every ministry was supposed to have a research, statistics, and information management directorate. By the time that law was passed, the National Statistical Office was already in place, but there was no convergence between data produced by any ministry with the Ghana Statistical Service. In fact, the only institution whose law had some convergence was the Birth and Death Registry that was mandated to produce the data and provide data to Statistical Service. All the other ministries by law were not mandated to do that. And so they could decide not to even make data available to GSS. So there was consequential amendment in the new law that required all ministries and all district assemblies, okay, to make their data available to the National Statistical Office. So that cross-government support for at least opening up between government institutions is very important. Now, there's a need to adopt a public domain dedicated or open data license, or having a platform that provides data. And that has been one of the key things we have been working on for a couple of years under the ambit of the SDGs, try to make data openly available through the National Reporting Platform. And this data comes from different line ministries. Currently, the portal that is open, that the public have access to, does not have all the indicators. So we have been revising it, and we have recently published over 80 indicators in the new one, and we are anticipating to get up to 100 indicators by the end of April, and then we'll make it openly available. And what this means is that it's not just the indicators, also the data. People can download the data either in CSV or in Excel and reuse it. And so that is one of the key things. Now, the next thing has to do with showing transparency regarding data sets that cannot be released publicly. So there are some data you cannot release them publicly. And so there should be transparency around that because of issues of national security. And this, for instance, if you pick data from the National Identification Authority, there are some data you cannot make them openly available because of national security issues in there. Then you look at establishing a transparent data request process. So people should know that, okay, if I want data from this institution, this is the process I have to go through. So for instance, if you go to a GSS website, they tell you if you want access to microdata, complete this form. We used to charge a fee for requesting microdata, but from 2016, we abolished that. So people requesting for microdata do not have to pay any fee. And the idea is to make this data available to as many people as possible. Then you need to establish a clear procedure for microdata access and publication, so that if someone want to pick macrodata, and then the person has a responsibility to acknowledge the institution where the data was picked from for that. So these are some of the things, and then publish a release calendar, which the Ghana Statistical Service, for instance, has been doing quite recently. In the past 5 years, we have consistently annually been published our release calendar. For instance, in 2022, we have already published our release calendar. All the data that we are expected to release in the year 2022, we have already published that. So people have access to it. They know when this data will be released, and they can also program their activities towards that. And then the other aspect is build the capacity, and that is very important. Build the capacity of data producers around how to open up data, and then build the capacity of data users to understand how to use open data. So these are the key driving principles. And for me, an important example is in September last year. We under one of the programs of making data available for the Parliament of Ghana for their oversight role and their representation role. One of the committees of Parliament was doing an oversight visit to one of the regions. And so what we did, working with the parliamentary committee, was that, okay, can we support you by providing you data on those districts that you were visiting? But of course, we cannot provide all data. So the focus was that, okay, let's focus on data on 3 thematic areas: poverty, health, and education. Then we told them, unfortunately, in Ghana, we do not have district level poverty estimates because all our poverty measures are based on sample surveys that only provide estimates at the regional level, not at the district level. However, with health and education, there are data at the district level. So consciously, what we did was to compile this data for a period of 6 years, from 2015 to 2015 to 2020. Okay. And when we made this data available to the members of parliament, and of course, we did a visit with them, it was interesting to note that in some districts that we visited, even the district chief executive was seeing the data about his district for the first time. And so if data, and this data, the institution that produced the data, we did not compile the data from anywhere. We picked it from the same districts, you understand? But the data is there. The chief executive of that district for the past 4 years had no idea that this data existed. So these are the principles of, if you make data available and the people understand, you build a capacity, they understand why the data must be made available. Those who need to use it, they are trained on how they use this data. There's so much value to it than you can imagine. And so these are the reasons why the principles underlying making data available are very important. And sorry, let me just mention this. Often when we talk about opening up data, the global north is always quick to point at the global south, especially Africa. But then we forget that in some cases, and I have said this in quite a number of fora, that the global north in many cases have more data on Africa than the African government themselves have on their continent. And the reason is, if you're looking at big data, satellite imagery, for so many decades, the global north have a lot of satellite data on Africa that has never been made available to Africa. And so when you are looking at opening up data, and that's why some of us are very excited about the platform that we have now on Data Earth Africa, where so much satellite data is made available to the continent through that platform. And many countries within the continent have access to historical data dating back the 1980s. So these are all the things that we will need to be engaging on and trying to push for data to be made openly available. Thank you.
Thank you so much today. Open data for Africa's development. What do you think? Because in all of this, what I'm hearing is that, yes, data, it looks as if, you know, we are saying that open data can solve all our problems. Open data for good health, open data for development, open data for democracy, open data to alleviate poverty. It looks as if it can solve all our problems. But clearly, from what we are also seeing, there are a lot of challenges in the space. And so if we're looking at open data for, you know, development as a continent, as individual countries, what should we be thinking about? What should we be prioritizing now? Should we be prioritizing all forms of data? Should we be thinking around maybe narrowing down on a specific area and developing that area and then moving on to other areas? So first of all, what should open data for development for Africa look like? And what should we be prioritizing in order to help us achieve that?
Yeah, thank you, Teki. You know, maybe I didn't get your question well, but I hope I did. And I think in terms of priority, really, for me, again, from where I stand, is one, we need to focus strongly on financing for data. Data costs a lot of money to produce. Omar was talking about the fact that the global north seems to have a huge amount of data on Africa than we do hold for ourselves. And it's just simply because, of course, one of the reasons they invest a lot of money in producing data, even in continents that are far away from their doorsteps. You know, the type of Earth observation, data, they have made all of that investment. They fund a lot of the censuses, that runs across most parts of Africa. And so African governments and Africa itself need to put a lot of priority on financing data production, because that is one of the biggest challenges that we have. If we can't finance them, it will be difficult for us to continue to have ownership. The issue of data governance will continue to be a pain for us. Secondly, I think that we need to also devote a lot of attention on capacity building. We, in our program, have been leading a number of efforts in capacity development in data issues. We did, together with AIMS, undertook a training on data science for public sector, stakeholders across the continent, and we're trying to build on that. And so we've seen that the capacity is really not there, particularly within the public sector. The private sector is far moving ahead. The development sector is also a bit ahead, but the public sector seems to be left behind. They're lagging behind. And so we need to build capacity, of course, not only for the public sector, across board, so that Africa can also leapfrog. And third thing, I think we need to invest a lot around innovation and entrepreneurship. There are so many young people today, so many startups, developer communities that want to have access to these data sets, to do the things that they are best known for: innovations, experimentations, entrepreneurship around the data that, our governments and other parties can open up. And then I think the fourth thing is around data use. We need to strongly promote, data use. We seem to have a lot of data in different places, but there is limited use of this data. So we need to find ways of creating demand, so to speak. The supply is there. Really, we are actually talking about opening it up, but we actually also have poor demand for this data. And finally, critically, is the issue of collaboration and partnership. I think that is one thing that will help us drive and achieve the kind of sustainable development we want to see from a data perspective. That all of the parties, whether it's civil society, developer community, the private sector, government agencies, we must collaborate within government institutions themselves. They must collaborate. Omar spoke about it, that governments itself don't share data with one another. Talk less of crossing data from the public to the private sector. So collaboration, partnership must be at the heart of what we want to do as a priority, that would then enable us to use data to cause the kind of development that we want to see in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Hadia, let me come back to you. We lost you, so if you can take it up from where you left off.
Yeah, okay. I hope now you can hear me well.
Very well.
So for me, so unlocking data for development will mean opening data for across sectoral data for people to use it. I'll talk about innovators. So we have African innovators struggling to access data so that they can develop tailor-made products. So this, I find this is important as we talk for development. opening up data so that innovator can be able to access that for innovative product. And I wanted to highlight on the issue of the fourth industrial revolution. As we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, basically we are talking about training the machines to be able to take the cognitive process of human being. And that means training machines basically with data. So opening up data is important, not only opening up the data, but the historical data, so that these innovators can be able to create local artificial intelligence products for African markets. So yeah, and also opening data for the other important sectors like agriculture, education, etc. But for me, my focus will be data should be open in a friendly environment, so that local innovator can be able to create tailor-made products. And on the side of the community as well, data open in a friend, not only to be opened, but data products should be friendly in such a way that communities can be able to make informed decision, be it on education, where to take their kids to school, which hospital to go, etc. So for me, those are the important things. Community to be able to understand what these different data products, but as well as innovator to be able to access the data for development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Uma, I'm coming to you. So prioritization. I'm hearing all of you talking about important things, but the question for me is that I'm also hearing that we have a lot of challenges, right? So where do we start if we really want to start seeing significant results in this area? What should we be prioritizing? Yes, I have heard Victor talk about things around the enablers, the quality of the data, capacity building, data literacy, data use, and all of that. But, should we be doing this to cover all the sets of data that is out there? Should we be narrowing down to only developmental data, as Mahadia mentioned, or what should we be doing in terms of prioritizing?
Okay, thank you. Let me start this by giving you a typical example. In 2021, GSS and ASEPA, Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs, through a project we are implementing with Parliament of Ghana called Data for Accountability. Now, we did a data fair for the Parliament at the forecourt of Parliament. And the idea was to help parliamentarians appreciate the level of exists that can support program implementation and others. Now, you and I already know that. For instance, for a very long time, Ghana has been fighting illegal mining. And we have seen a lot of pictures of
Hello, Uma, can you hear me? Or I've lost you. Uma, are you there or we've lost you? Okay, I think we'll come back to Uma. Victor, let me can come back to you whilst we wait for Uma to get back online. So in all of these, right, when you look at the open data ecosystem in Africa, where are we, right? Are we in a good place? Are we trailing behind? What would it take to bring us to an ideal place if we are not?
Thank you, Becky. I think maybe just a political insight. I think we're doing well, but we're trailing behind, obviously.
That sounds like a politically correct answer.
And a lot needs to be done. If you look across some, places in Africa, a lot of progress has been made, frankly speaking. Some countries have taken it, head on. I recall the work we did in Sierra Leone, and I love what's happening there. The Right to Access Information Commission, taking the lead to ensure that the citizens can have access to any data and information from different government agencies. And that commission was given the power to prosecute any government official, that refuses access to information and data requested by the citizens. And of course, if you go to some other countries also, a lot has been done. But I think that a lot still needs to be done. We need to break the silos, and start working together. There's a huge amount of data set that sits within the private sector, privately held data, that can be of immense resource to every nation. And we need to find ways to break that silo and bring everyone together, and create that sufficient incentives for everyone to want to work together to contribute data for national development, be it from the public or the private sector. Secondly, I think that we need to continue to develop the enabling policies, the laws, the regulatory frameworks that would, make everyone comfortable enough, really, to bring what they have within their domains, to a central place, to enable everyone that needs to use that data to have access to it. So breaking the silos and, forming those sustainable partnerships and collaborations, supported by the enabling laws, regulatory frameworks, and what have you. These are important, are priorities that we need to pursue if Africa, must catch up. And I think finally, that political will, data must be top priority on the political agenda. Government talks a lot about it, but oftentimes, they do, little, which pretty much is demonstrated in the very small amount of money that is committed to funding data production. So I think that's where we need to start from. Let me stop. I think Kumar is back online. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Umar, sorry, we lost you. So you were talking about setting up at the parliamentary office a collaboration with Parliament.
Exactly. Yes. So with that, then we use the platform of Data Earth Africa to do an analysis of how much of the forest reserve of the Apaprama. We did that for several forest reserves, but I'm just talking about Apaprama in this case.
Oh dear, did we lose Umar again?
Now, Apaprama Forest District of Ashanti. Yes. So we quantify how much of that forest reserve. The forest reserve is a protected area, right? So between January and December 2017, January to December 2018, up to January to December 2020, then we realized that in January to December 2020 alone, the vegetation loss as a result of illegal mining in that forest reserve was 10% of the entire forest reserve, which is just from January to December 2020, which was more than all the other 4 years put together for that forest reserve. So when I made this presentation, and the majority leader was visited the fair. So when I mentioned, I showed him this, and I asked the question, what happened in 2020 in December relative to the previous years? What the Honorable Minister, Member of Parliament said was, look, Umar, Cabinet need to see this, because we know we are causing destruction, but we have no idea the quantum of destruction we are causing. So this brings me back to the question you asked. I mentioned from the onset that we need data about the environment, we need data about our resources, we need data about our people. And so the investment in all these fronts at the same time is very important, because for a very long time, as Victor mentioned, we paid a lot of lip service to investing in data. But the huge investment has been in the area of population data, the social sector, not much in the environment, not much on even the natural resources we have. So I believe that for us to leapfrog the processes of development, we will need to radically invest in all this. And that is why the SDGs are looking at sustainable development, right? And it's not just about the people, it's about the planet as well. And so if we invest in these areas and we understand, and the World Economic Forum estimated that if we are able to detect and stop illegal mining in Africa, the continent will be making over $900 million a year for only detecting and preventing illegal mining. So look at it from that perspective. How much money do we need for the other development, other social sectors? So if we can make this kind of, just by investing in this kind of data resource, you can imagine the huge impact we'll be making on our continent. And so these are some of the things that we need to continue to speak about and get our governments to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma. I'll come back to you because Mahadia is not yet back. I think she may be having some connectivity challenges. So this is all exciting, but what would it really cost? You, both you and Victor, and this question goes to you because you are in the space. Clearly, there needs to be a lot of financial investments in this area. And we know that when it comes to our continent, we're always struggling with, resources, and there are competing needs for these, scarce financial resources. So how can we position the continent, again, speaking on priorities, to, invest? Are there ways by which we can do this in the least cost method? What other resources can our governments and entities leverage on in order to make this happen, considering how important it is?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think Victor touched on that earlier. On looking at investments in innovation, research and development is an area where we, as a continent, do not invest much in. And let me again use this example. For instance, the partnership between the Ghana Statistical Service, Vodafone Ghana, and Flowminder, which of course you are a member of the steering committee. You realize that just through the partnership that we built, now Vodafone Ghana made their data available to GSS without any fee. So it means that government has access to this data without any costs directly to the private sector entity. And we built the infrastructure. And when COVID hit Ghana, we immediately, and that was the first time ever in the history of Ghana, that the National Statistical Office produced data within 3 days of the lockdown. When the lockdown was instituted, within 3 days, we published the first mobility analysis to give government an indication of whether people were complying with the lockdown in Kumasi and Accra in response to the COVID non-pharmaceutical interventions. And you realize that how much resources did government have to put in there? The private sector was willing to make their data available. So I think it has to do with government recognizing that, one, we need to invest in data. We need to have an honest conversation with all the players, private, public, and anybody who has that, something at stake in this. Let us open up, discuss it honestly, and identify synergies. Where can we work together? Government doesn't have resources. And look, investment in data is huge. And this, in our democracy, as was said by our vice president, investment in data is not obvious to the average voter, right? And so government want to invest in areas that are obvious to the average voter so that they can vote them in power the next time. Putting so much money in data is not something that's, but without doing that, you will not know where you will need to invest these other resources that would actually lead to the people keeping you in power. And so I think there's the need for honest conversation between government, the private sector, and all other players who have a stake in this. And then we identify, and as I said, we have to invest in all the sectors, the social sector, that is in the population and that, the environment, and on the natural resources. So that at the end of the day, where government has no resources and the private sector is willing to provide, what incentives can government provide to the private sector to be willing to put in resources in this? And so this for me would be an important step for the continent, because without a private sector coming in, there's no way we can do it, because government does not have the financial muscles that are required to invest in the data ecosystem all by themselves. And we need to do a lot of investment in research and development, where we can continuously improve on the processes and produce the data more cheaper than we have done in the past. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ma. I think we got Mahadia, but lost her again. Victor, I know you have stressed a lot on partnerships, right? Clearly, we have a huge challenge around resourcing, especially financially resourcing the open data ecosystem. How can partnerships enable that?
Thanks, Becky, and that's an important, part of this whole conversation and the development of data in Africa. As it is right now, we can't do this by ourselves. Even within Africa, we need partnership across board. And one key partner for me is the private sector. We need their participation, and in fact, we need their leadership. Trust me, when private sector fully sets into this space and begins to take leadership, I think it would draw in a lot of attention and investment that would then begin to flow in from every part of the world. You've seen what's happening in the telco industry. For instance, in Ghana, where Vodafone is working with Ghana Statistical Service. The same thing we try to replicate in Namibia, in Botswana. Just bringing in the private sector guys, GVG, working together with the statistical office and trying to bring in the largest mobile operator in that country. So the private sector is a huge component of this whole game, and they need to be fully engaged. Government needs to fully engage the private sector. They speak a different language, and I think they just want to see what the incentive looks like, what the value proposition looks like, and to be sure that it's mutual. You're not just asking us to commit the entire resources that we have, and we're not getting anything back. And I'm not saying they should be paid back, but there should be, the proposition should be mutual, beneficial to everyone. So I think that's important. Secondly, I'm beginning to see that the developer communities across Africa are playing a fantastic, role. The likes of Zindi, Adanian Lab, Mino Health, all of them are spread across, the continent. These are the guys who are leading innovation and entrepreneurship, using data to drive the issues of, deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence types, to create products and analytics that is helping us, to up our game, both within development issues and in the private sector. And so we need to enable that community and bring them in and work with them. And I think thirdly, we need to show the potential of development possible by using data. Omar spoke about the use of Earth observation data. We've seen a lot of use cases and the policy issues that have come out of the use of Earth observation data in Ghana, in Senegal, even in Tanzania, where our focal point at that point in time, was relating with the vice president's office, showing them results about what is happening in a particular lake that is supplying water, for farming, for electricity, and for what have you. In Senegal, it was the same thing. The key lake that was supplying water to the entire city of Dakar, they were monitoring it for years using Earth observation. So showing those potentials will begin to cost a lot. And I think the most important thing is amplifying it. We need to do a better job about communicating. Ghana Statistical Service has started something recently documenting the fantastic work they've done over the years. This is something we don't do too well. The kind of documentation and amplification of our work that will draw in partners, both within and outside of Africa. And that in itself can bring in both, monetary and non-monetary, type resources to help us develop the data landscape. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Mahadia, I think that I will come to you with my last question. I don't know if we have questions from our participants here, and then whether there are any questions from Facebook as at now. But Mahadia, just come in here. We lost you a bit along the way, but we've been talking about all these challenges that seems to be in the space, especially challenges around finances. Victor have also highlighted the importance of part in really helping us build this ecosystem. From where you sit, where are we as Africa, and how can we grow if we want to really develop this space?
So still in Africa, we are still at a pilot stage. Most of our open data programs are donor driven rather than driven by the, by the government. So I see that as the major challenge in terms of sustainability of these. Is that World Bank funded a lot on open data project. During the time, the open data portal were actively being updated. Photos are no longer being accessible. So I feel we are at a pilot stage, and we will be well placed in the government as the initiative within the government and being institutionalized rather than depending on the donor programs. Thank you.
That I would use this opportunity to take your closing remarks on this issue. Maybe use it to give us some final, remarks on what we should be doing, as civil society, as governments, as individuals, as private sector, in order to really help us achieve open data for Africa's development. I'll start with you, Mahadia, and then I'll go to Victor and Umar.
My final remark, I would say that open data is a key ingredient to development. And when we talk about open data, we should not also forget about gender disaggregated data, because there is also another issue of the data that is open. Not much of it is gender disaggregated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Victor, your concluding remarks for us.
Thank you so much. So I think that we need to collaborate more, and government need to take a bold step, in bringing everyone together. They own that space. They need to bring everyone together. And secondly, I think we need to address the fears and concerns that everyone has about opening up data. What are those critical issues? Thirdly, we need to invest in capacity. There is very, very low levels of capacity across Africa. And so we need to pay a lot more attention And my colleague from Tanzania, Maida, had talked a lot about the fourth industrial revolution. If we must ride on that wave, we need capacity. We need to train our young ones. We need to develop more data scientists, etc. across the continent. And let me say this, that when COVID struck, it was obvious that many African nations were suffering from a weak and inadequately governed data ecosystem. And you can see that across many sectors of our economy. It was initially difficult for a lot of policymakers and planners to have access to data. And so it's incumbent on us to all work together to create that better access to data and promote data use. Timely, what I call timely and quality data, and it comes by collaboration. And collaboration must just take the center stage at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor. Umar, your concluding remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, so I'll write at the back of what Victor and Madia have said and indicate that we all need to have the incentives for collaborating, building partnerships, and building trust in the data we produce. And for that, it is important that in the context of Ghana, for instance, we have been working with civil society, with the private sector and academia to develop a data quality assurance framework. And the idea is to help build trust in data that are produced across different entities, government institutions, private sector entities, civil society. So I would want to continue to urge all of us to look at that approach as an important step in making data available and open, because it's not every data that is out there that is good data, because there's also the danger of taking the wrong data and utilizing it to formulate policies that would come to hurt us. And so there should be a system for ensuring that the data that are out there that we want to be made openly available to all meet some basic quality standards. And to that extent, we need to work together as a global community on the continent, share knowledge, do peer exchanges, because different countries have strengths in areas that others do not. And we need to encourage each other through that. And that is why I see this particular forum, platform you have provided to be a very good platform where we can share ideas around what is happening elsewhere to guide us and to help us move forward the agenda of encouraging the use of data for evidence-informed policy making. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mahadia, Victor, and Umar. I'm really grateful for spending time with us, and thank you to our audience from around the world that were able to join us today. I think as a way of summary, I can't put it any better than our eminent speakers have put it. Clearly, open data is a critical resource that we need for Africa's development. In order to do that, we have to have access to the right kind of data. We have to put in place the right frameworks that can really enable access. We have to build capacity, across board, and we need to, rally around the key players and stakeholders, which from what we have heard essentially involves everybody. So collaboration and partnerships are going to be very critical if we are going to achieve Africa's development and then harness the kind of data that can be made available through the open data ecosystem. And so without much ado, I just want to say thank you so much for breaking your weekend with Victor, especially you stopping your good sleep to join us. It's been a pleasure having you. But one of the things that I keep seeing is that there are still a lot of things that we haven't unearthed here. And transparency and capacity building is equally important. So we probably have to come back again soon to talk about more specific issues and to delve deeper into some of the challenges that we've identified with the hope of finding solutions to it. So thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us. We look forward to having you again another time. Thank you and bye-bye.